Racing hot streak was cooled by Dunbeholden. Treasure Beach were left fuming against the defending champs, and things got a little too spicy in Tivoli Gardens. But we start one place and one place only, and that's at Waterhouse Midget Stadium, where it was deja vu for the hosts. This is Match Week 5 review show. Yeah, people, welcome back to Jump Hill Fun. We had some good matches this week, as well as some controversial calls. But as promised, we head to Jerusalem for the Jamaican El Clasico. First, we begin with the starting 11 for the home team. No Wilson or Bolt, so Amos comes in to face his old club. Denley Deacon kept his spot, and Javian Bryan made way for Rivaldo Mitchell up front. As for the visiting junglists, well, to highlight that all the main players are back and fit, Coach Philip Williams named an unchanged 11 for the first time this season. No, when the game started, it was a lightning quick start by the hosts, and they really should have taken the lead, but Deacon somehow steered his shot wide. Arnett were then forced to get to grips quickly after that and weren't looking too bad on the ball, but it was all Waterhouse with the actual attempts at goal, as they were being fairly aggressive in their approach. But Arnett were holding their own and had some decent looks on the other end of the field. The game's tempo was at a nice pace at this point, but then around the 38th minute, it was cut into half, as both teams looked to catch their breath. But this slowdown actually favored Arnett, who ended the half on the stronger foot after this run-on shot by Granville stung the palms of Bernard. So, no goal heading into the break. Waterhouse clearly didn't like how that first half ended and made the choice to switch out Murray for Javian Bryan to start the second half. And what a blistering start to the half it was, as all of a sudden the game's tempo turned back up and the play was quite open. But again, it was Waterhouse with the better chances, but when Mitchell squandered his chance, it was looking like it was going to be one of those days for the Firehouse Nation. But Javian Bryan is well loved around these parts for a reason, and when he realized he had so much space on the ball here from 25 yards out, it was no problem for him to beat Bennett in the Arnett goal. And finally, the hosts got their lead, 1-0 to Waterhouse. But amongst the celebration, Firehouse fans would remember they also took the lead last week against Harborview and still lost that match. So you could imagine they must have had a PTSD moment when this chaos in the box led to Reed teeing up Granville, who calmly picked a corner and get the Junglers back on level terms. 1-1 as the equalizer came almost instantly. Right after that, Reed himself had a huge chance to give Arnett the lead, but Bernard did enough to deny the legendary striker. From here, after a raft of changes by both teams, Arnett went a bit conservative, inviting the pressure from Waterhouse. This almost proved to be a disastrous move when Javian Bryan latched onto this glorious delivery into the box from Martin Davis, but the tall striker could only manage to balloon the ball over the net on the stretch. It was a tough chance, but one the host will regret not too long after that, as in the 84th minute, the Junglers got things going quickly after a stoppage in play, and Reed would find substitute Shea Smith all alone in the box after the Waterhouse defense were caught napping, and he applied the deft finish to give Arnett a big lead late in the match. Waterhouse were desperate to avoid a similar result to last week, but this effort by Bryan was the closest they will come, as the final whistle will be blown not long after that, and the Junglists won their fourth straight El Clasico. So it was an action-packed second half, but how was the entire game start? I'm a bit surprised Arnett won majority of the possession with 55%, but Waterhouse having more total shots with 14 to Arnett's 10 makes total sense. The Junglists had more on target, however, with 5 compared to Firehouse 2, and there were 7 yellow cards given out, with 5 of them being in the first half. Okay, let's begin with Arnett Gardens first. Coach Philip Williams asked us all to be patient, and after this 3-game winning streak, who should ever doubt the man again? The team now seems settled and, more importantly, looks fully on board with Williams' way of doing things. As for Waterhouse, oh boy, a horrible sense of deja vu here after last week's defeat to Harborview. These are crucial points they are dropping at home, and they must work on their concentration, especially after scoring. Anyway, once again, this one ended Arnett Gardens 2, Waterhouse 1. So we move on from the El Clasico to the first meeting between Police and the Maroons. First, the starting 11 for Chapelton. The Phoenix only made one change to the team that lost at home to Arnett last week, and that was to replace Shamron Phillips with a former Portmore United player, Zane Pinnock. As for the Police, they only made one change from their last match as well, as Elliston was replaced by Alwyn Danvers in the team. Now, when the game started, the Maroons were all over the Police. Marcus Ross, who has been on great goal-scoring form to start the season, should have given his team the lead right here. The Phoenix kept at it though. Levon Williams would be the latest with a glorious opportunity, but he only found the side netting. After this, Police finally settled and started to find their danger men on the wings more often, but it would be their centre forward Facey with their biggest chance so far. In the preview, we questioned how Police should approach this match, but credit to them, they were really taking the fight to the Maroons. Their wingers, Diamond Clark and Alwyn Danvers, were both a constant threat, and Danvers even missed a golden chance with this shot that went over the bar. Disappointing, but a clear sign that they backed themselves to get the victory here tonight. They would test Prince Dennis Smith in the Maroons' goal once again with his deep free kick, but the Chapelton number 1 got it away for safety. Facey and Police would end the half with one more big chance, but it remained 0-0 at the break. Second half now, and Rabina Gordon got licensed to go further forward from right back, and he would produce the half's first real chance, but his shot went straight to Samuels in goal. While at the other end, it was the Facey show, but he could not find the net and he only found iron. At this point, I noticed a tactical switch by the Police team as they opted to have everyone except Facey behind the ball in a mid-block and dared the Maroons to break them down. Remember, a tactic that worked so well for Arnett against the Maroons last week, which all led to the Maroons' chances drying up, and Police would have the better chances, including this glorious one here for Ricketts from Facey's cross, but the number 25 could not get it on frame. And it's a shame too, because that would most likely would have been the winner, as the game ended not too long after that with the points being shared. So a fascinating scoreless game, but how was the game match stats? Well, according to this, Spanish Town had 16 total shots compared to the Maroons 9. Only 2 were on target though for the Spanish Town Police according to these stats, which was the same for the Maroons as well. The Maroons had 56 dangerous attacks, while the Police had 63. Okay, let's begin with Spanish Town Police first. Apart from the opening moments to the match, that was a fine showing. Heck, I would even go as far as saying that was their best performance so far this season. But this too was another reminder of their lack of goal scoring in the final third. They have to make a move here come January. As for the Maroons, they just have to bury those early chances. It almost cost them the match. Also, the tactics used by Police in the second half caused this team some troubles again. They should expect more teams to play them like this going forward. But once again, it ended here. Chapelton Maroons 0, Spanish Town Police FC 0. We now move on from the Phoenix to the Crows as defending champions Cavalier were hosting New Boys Treasure Beach. First, the starting lineup for Cavalier: Lewis Watson returns to the bench, Adrian Reed Jr. returns to midfield, and Daryl Massicott will lead the line, with Stein returning to the bench as well. As for the visitors, midfielder Daniel Hardy comes into the team, so too does Livingston, and Porter was given another chance up front. Now, when the game started, Cavalier were the brighter ones right out of the blocks. They would control the early proceedings, but didn't really create any meaningful chances. But they would still take the early lead after this penalty was given to them in the 8th minute. Treasure Beach coaching staff were adamant that this was a soft call, but nonetheless, Christopher Ainsworth was the happy volunteer to give the champs the early lead, 1-0. After this, Treasure Beach had a little more pep in their steps as they were eager to get back into things, while Cavalier seemed unbothered and produced more half chances. In fact, there were 2 unbothered. They got a little careless at the back and almost made another blooper reel worthy mistake at the back. But Cavalier were largely still in control, but Treasure Beach were also growing more and more into the match. And they even thought they found the equalizer right here, but their system flag came up and saved Cavalier with an offside call. Right after that, there was another silly mistake by Cavalier, but Treasure Beach failed to capitalize. But that Cavalier defense remained shaky and was finally breached in the 41st minute when Jaheim Harris latched onto a great through pass before calmly finishing past White and into the back of the net. 1-1, and Treasure Beach were officially back into the match. Cavalier knows that they need a win here and reacted well to being pegged back, but this chaos in the box was their last great chance before the halftime break. No, Cavalier's Jadine White didn't have the best first half and was replaced by youngster Garfield Thompson to start the second half, and he would immediately be in the thick of things right here. But then comes the game's big controversial moment. The ball was delivered to the back post after set piece, heads went up and the ball went to the top of the six before it was hammered home to give the goal. 1-1 and everything seemed legit as Treasure Beach continued their celebrations. But the ref and his assistant had other plans. They disallowed the goal, citing there was a foul in the build-up. In my opinion, everything looks legal, but to be fair to the referee, I'm seeing it from a distant camera angle and he's seeing it much closer at ground level. But still, you could understand why the visitors were left fuming. And come on, you know the sport by now, as just moments after, Cavalier raced away on the counter through Stein after Treasure Beach's own set piece, and he would eventually be taken down in the box by Morgan, drawing yet another penalty. Ainsworth stepped up again for a double take and tucked it away to give him and the Champs their second of the match, 2-1. And they almost found their third literally seconds after, but luckily for Treasure Beach, the ball would cannon right after upright. From here, it was a cat and mouse match as Treasure Beach threw more and more men forward looking for another equalizer, while the Champs were more reserved and looked for the perfect counter. For most of the remaining time, it worked as Cavalier were once again looking comfortable in the lead, but they did have one nervous moment here on the cross, but the attacker could only manage to steer his header wide. And that would end up being Treasure Beach's last chance for a share of the points, as the game ended right after that, giving Cavalier all 3 points to take home. A tough loss for the league newcomers, but how was the game in terms of stats? Well, Cavalier had more possession, they had 56% compared to Treasure Beach 44. Total shots were close by both teams, Cavalier had 10 while Treasure Beach had 11. 5 shots on target for Cavalier while 6 on target for the visitors. 73 dangerous attacks by Cavalier while 63 dangerous attacks by Treasure Beach. Okay, we will begin with Cavalier. It was a bit of an ugly win, and yeah, I know they controlled majority of the match, but once again we saw so many individual errors that could have easily cost them dearly. But champions always find a way, I suppose, and on the day they did exactly that. As for Treasure Beach, another credible away performance got them 0 points, but they should not be discouraged by that fact, although they once again let their opponents off the hook with some big misses. Also, on another day, those referee decisions easily gone their way, so there's plenty to feel optimistic about. But not about today's scoreline, as once again this one ended Cavalier 2, Treasure Beach 1. From Sabina, we head to West Kingston at the Edward Siaga complex, where Tivoli Gardens finally returned home to take on Molynes United. We will begin with Tivoli's lineup. We have a new face in goal as Nathaniel Francis took the gloves. Watson misses out, but Radica Wellington was added to the 11. As for the visitors, Molynes United, new striker Wisdom Yubani gets another shot. Darren Denai kept his place in goal, and young attacker Devon Davis also made a return. Now, when the game started, it was actually a decent start by the visitors. They clearly settled quicker, but eventually Tivoli would find their footing, even though it didn't produce too much in the attacking third. In fact, Molynes would test a goalkeeper first with this effort from range, which Francis took no chances with. But then he almost caused his own downfall with this poor clearance that went straight to Molynes. His blushes were spared thanks to this awful shot. Molynes, however, was having the better run of things, as I never seen Tivoli so timid and lacking fighting spirit, especially here at the Edward Siaga complex. And what really saved them at this point were the numerous stoppages to the match, especially the lengthy one that saw Devon Davis being forced out of the match and replaced by Jason Wright. What also saved Tivoli was this possible missed call by referee Odette Hamilton. I don't know, guys, the player looked like he was away here before he was dragged back, and that could have easily been seen as a red card. But not even a foul was given here. Then it would be Tivoli's turn to question Hamilton after this cross struck what seems to be an arm in the penalty box, but she again turned a blind eye to it all. Molynes would have one last chance to grab the lead before half-time, but Jason Wright would miss the target. 0-0 at the break. Second half now, and Tivoli started much better and with purpose, but they would be dealt a huge blow very early on when Radica Wellington had to be substituted due to injury. Steve Clark came on in his place, but coach Jerome Waite also made the choice to bring on Trevor McCain in place of Kimberly Smith, and he would go on to make a huge difference in the middle of the park. But Tivoli was still being very naive at the back, and if it wasn't for Francis' quick thinking after Price's mistake, they could have easily been 1-0 down. And Molynes would eventually take the lead moments after that from someone no one saw coming in a manner no one saw coming. Poor Alton Lewis looked like he was trying to cushion a header back to his goalkeeper, but he beat him instead for the own goal, 1-0 to Molynes. But Tivoli did respond well to this and started to control things as well as they seek the equalizer. McCain was especially having an influence at this match as he pulled the strings in midfield, but his attackers keep missing their mark. Clark would be next to come close on this play, but again that shot was off target, but at least they were getting closer and closer. And then the goal finally arrived from an in-swinging set piece from McCain. Molynes failed to pick up Kevin Wilson, who was free on their doorsteps, and he made sure to get something on the ball to beat the Nye to draw Tivoli level. After this, McCain was the clear danger man, and Molynes captain Sir Gina Frankson made it a point of duty to eliminate the threat. This was a crunching tackle, and referee Odette Hamilton made the controversial call that he only warranted a yellow card, so Molynes was able to keep all 11 players on the field. Tivoli will get one last chance at victory in the dying moments, and this is where I'm sure fans was missing Nicola Fuller, but it would be Alton Lewis with a curler that was too high in the end, and that would be the final action as the points would be shared. So, a sometimes controversial but interesting game, here are the match stats. The home side had more possession with 57% and had way more total shots with 19. Only 4 of those were on target, however, compared to Molynes 3. Tivoli had 55 dangerous attacks compared to Molynes 39. Okay, where to begin? Tivoli kept their unbeaten record at Edward Siaga Complex going after they made their return, but this was also their worst performance I personally witnessed on this ground. They don't currently look like a Jerome Waite coach team as they lack running and fighting spirit, but I'm sure they will get it right soon. As for Molynes, not a bad first half, but they had to get some goals, but when they were dominating. They lost their way in the second half, but it's not a bad result to walk out of Edward Siaga with a point. Only problem, they are yet to win so far this season, and they will be desperate to get 3 points from somewhere. But anyway, once again, this one ended Tivoli Gardens 1, Molynes United 1. Staying in Kingston, we now move on to a misplaced Portmore derby as Dunbeholden took on Perfect Racing United. We will begin with Dunbeholden's 11. John-Luc Wilmot was back in goal. Clive Wedderburn kept his spot up front, but Shaquem Powell misses out. As for Racing United, Aaron Enel kept his spot in goal, so too does Andre Campbell up front, but Javon Cole misses out after starting last week. Now, when the game started, it was all the men in yellow as they dominated play and were all over Dunbeholden. They were getting shots on target, but nothing to really stretch Wilmot in the Dunbeholden goal. Dunbeholden held out and eventually got a moment to breathe. Then they produced a decent chance for their main marksman Nicholas Nelson with his direct ball over the top, but NL was decisive to get away for safety. Then an unfortunate moment in the match, Tajay Grant rose well to get a header towards goal, but he paid a mighty price and had to be substituted right after. Then Nelson will get an even better chance down the other end for Dunbeholden, but his flicker and header lacked conviction and direction. And somehow, both teams went into the halftime break locked at 0-0. Second half now, and Racing once again started on the front foot. Then early in the half came the match's big controversial moment. From the free kick, the ball was placed into the crowded box before it landed neatly for Nikai Ellis. The midfielder struck it clean and got it into the back of the net for what looked like another amazing goal. But it was flagged by the assistant referee for offside. Okay, now I wish we had a side angle to get a definite answer, but using the line of the 18-yard box, this looks to be a bad call. But again, I guess you could say the assistant does have the better viewing angle on the ground. So 0-0 it remains. That decision lit a fire in Ellis and had a 10-minute spell where he almost looked like a young Kevin De Bruyne, but he too could not find the go-ahead goal. while Dunbeholden made some tactical adjustments of their own and then proceeded to handle racing much better. And they will produce the match last great chance, but this toe puck by Marlon Allen went straight to NL. So 0-0 it remained at the end as the points were shared. So all the talk will be about the offside call, but how was the game start? Well, Racing edged possession with 51%. Racing had far more total shots as well with 7 compared to Dunbeholden's 2. 80 dangerous attacks for Dunbeholden and 85 for Racing. Okay, let's begin with Dunbeholden. Solid point after the really awful first half. They are obviously not going to blow teams away, but they are hanging on and collecting crucial points here and there. But you do wonder if this team has another gear to them to truly challenge for that playoff spot. As for Racing, well, their perfect start to the season was ended, but they will have far more concerning things on their mind. It was bad enough to lose Tajay Grant to injury, but they also lost their captain Markovich Brown to injury as well. Not to mention, I am sure they're still fuming over that offside call. But anyway, once again this one ended, Dunbeholden 0, Racing United 0. Now, onto our final game as Portmore was looking to gain ground on league leaders Montego Bay United. As for the starting lineup for Portmore, after his match-winning goal last week, Orlando Russell gets a start. So too does new boy Victor Evans, and Peter McGregor was the main man in attack. As for Mobe, there was still no Jamari Clark in the squad, so Jordan Fletcher leads the line. Youngster Nashada Gibbs keeps his spot on the left, and Trinidadian international Josiah Trumingham captains the side. Now, when the game started, it was Mobe with the early pressure and even got a 1-2 decent looks at Portmore's goal. Portmore would recover though and had a decent effort of their own with the strike from Gale, but it was always rising. Then the game became a bit open as both teams tried their best to find a match opening goal. It would eventually arrive, but we had to wait until the 31st minute when Ramon Howell picked out Russell with a delightful long pass, and the winger kept his composure before firing in a low cross for McGregor, who slid and tucked it home. 1-0, and Mobe all of a sudden found himself chasing. Moments after that, Portmore would once again race away in the open space looking for the second, but Marcus Reed's strike was too straight. That would be the last major action of the first half. Second half now, and both went on the offense, slugging it out like two heavyweight boxers in the ring. Dwight Merrick, who has been on sensational form to start the season, came close to finding Mobe's equalizer, but Daniel Russell did well to parry it for safety. But Mobe kept coming though, and Portmore knew they needed a second to truly kill the game off. Luckily for them, they would find it in the 83rd minute. Look at this peach of a ball by Ramon Howell right on the boot of Javier Brown, who took his time to calm the nerves, then placed the ball past Burton and into the back of the net. 2-0, and that was game, set and match for Portmore United. So Portmore handed Mobe their first loss of the season, but how was the game match stats? The Sun City boys dominated possession with 58%, but Mobe outshot their foes 12-9. 6 on target for Portmore, while only 3 was on target for Montego Bay United. 69 dangerous attacks for Portmore United, while 117 dangerous attacks for Montego Bay United. Okay, let's begin with Mobe. You could call this a bad day out at the office, although that would be a great disservice to how well Portmore played. Mobe left gaps at the back, and Portmore exploited them perfectly. Something for Mobe to think about and to work on going forward. As for Portmore, this was a statement win. Their defense was solid as usual, but more importantly, the attackers got the job done. And we again have to give a special shout out to their captain Ramon Howell, who was outstanding on the night. And he was one of the main reasons why this one ended Portmore United 2, Montego Bay United 0. So remember, Mount Pleasant was on a bye week, so that's match week 5 in the books. Now let's take a quick look on the table. Well, we have a new league leader as Racing United. As Racing United moved into first place with 10 points from their 4 games. Portmore joined them though with 10 points as well from their 5 games. Mobe slipped all the way to 3rd with 10 points. Phoenix remained steady in 4th with 10 points. Arnett is all the way up in the top 5 with 9 points from their 5 games. Cavalier got a big wing to come in the top 6 with 7 points. Dunbeholden is hanging about with 7 points in 7th. Waterhouse slipped a bit to 8th with 6 points. Mount Pleasant were idle, so they remain in 9th with 5. Tivoli also have 5 points in 10th place. Treasure Beach are 11th with 4 points. Harbourview was also idle, has 4 points in 12th. Molynes still without a victory, but they have 3 points in 13th. And Spanish Town Police FC got their first point in the top flight, but remain in 14th place. But alright guys, that is it from this latest review show. Thank you all for watching, and please like, subscribe and share as we look to keep you all up to date on everything in the JPL leading up to the final in May. Otherwise, with great JPL content, you're already at the right place. JPL fan. YouTube, pick up yourself.